move forward with our second speaker for tonight. Sabrina is a corporate team facilitator and executive coach who empowers empathetic leaders in the creative and tech industries to build high-performing teams. Through skill-building workshops and managing work stress, assertive communication, and emotional intelligence, Sabrina has helped leaders from companies like Amazon, LinkedIn, Salesforce, WSIB, and Dress for Success Toronto, and she's accredited by the International Coaching Federation, ICF, a top credentialing body for professional coaches. Get ready for her insightful talk, building innovative teams, one difficult conversation at a time. You won't want to miss it.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Delia. Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start off with a personal experience. A few years back, I was leading a tech implementation where I was working. I was internally hired, I was internally hired into this role. And before I was hired, the leadership of the team, so the director and the senior director, were already working with an external consultant to test it out, to see if the technology was feasible. So when I joined, they already had a way of working together. They had a rhythm, right? And this rhythm continued, meaning I wasn't brought into some important conversations. I felt like I was excluded, and that didn't feel good. But I didn't say anything. I just waited, like some of us do. But this went on for months and months and months. The only thing I did was I went home and I vented to my partner at that time, which is a very good way to process our emotions, right? So I didn't speak up for a while until one day at this big stakeholder meeting, I just lashed out at this consultant. Like, I let my emotions get the best of me. To be honest, I don't even remember what I told him when I lashed out. Because our brains have this really good coping mechanism called repression. We can repress memories and situations that bring out emotions, negative emotions like shame or just unpleasantness. So that happened, but we were two key people in this project. We had to keep working together. We had no choice, so we did. We continued to work, but every time we were in a meeting room together, it just was not easy. Not just for me and him, but also for people around us and the team. There was this thick layer of unease. So there was a cost to me, a cost to him, and a cost to the team, but also a cost to the organization, especially from a standpoint of innovation. First of all, my brain capacity, or majority of it, was taken up by thinking about and managing this conflict. So I didn't have a lot of brain space to think about this technology, to experiment. I wasn't free, or my brain space wasn't free to do that. Second, there was this open mistrust between me and this consultant, and that mistrust inevitably seeped into the rest of the team. So it was really hard to create a genuinely supportive, trusting team culture, which you know is a prerequisite for innovation. Third, even when I my limited brain capacity and found some ideas that I wanted to try out, I didn't feel psychologically safe to bring this consultant into the conversation and have him poke holes in my ideas. So this is how I held back on innovation, but I'm sure everyone else on the team had some flavor of this and they weren't free to be innovative. So can I ask, has anyone else has had a similar experience or something in the vicinity of this experience? Okay, good. You know my pain. Okay. So even if you haven't had the same experience, difficult conversations and places to have them are everywhere, right? These are from negotiating for a salary raise, asking for a promotion, giving some feedback to your team, asking your manager not to micromanage you, influencing stakeholders when they have very different priorities, pushing back on a deadline, pushing back on scope creep. And this is just examples from our work life. If we bring in our personal life, there are even more situations and needs where we need to have these conversations. So I'm positive that what I'll be talking about today is applicable to everyone. So going back to my experience with the consultant, like I said, first I didn't say anything. I was just silent. So I was being a silent or passive communicator on one end. Then when I lost it at that stakeholder meeting, I went to the other end, which was aggressive communication. This is very typical for a lot of us. We stay here for a while, the resentment builds, and it just explodes. Right? And we all go between these two ends based on where we are, who we are talking to, how much context we have about something. But as you can see, these are not healthy ways of communicating when we are having a difficult conversation. The best way is the middle path, which is assertive communication. What does that mean? You say what you want to say, but you say it in a way that the message can be received by the other person. The message lands, and you can work towards a favorable outcome for all parties. So what we are going to talk about today is some best practices for assertive communication, and I'm going to wrap up with a framework of how to shape this conversation if you are initiating. So let's start off with the best practices. The first one is to believe in what you have to say, believing in what your needs are in this situation. In my experience, the personal experience I explained, I knew that I should be included in some of these conversations, but part of me felt like, oh, I just took this role. Maybe I don't know enough about this technology capability. Maybe I'm just not needed in these conversations. Therefore, I held back, and that didn't go well. The next best practice is to time the conversation well. So I went for months and months without having this conversation. I should have ideally watched the behavior for maybe a few weeks, at most a month, giving people time to adjust, collecting my observations as well. But then I should have dragged the consultant into a one-on-one conversation and hashed it out. So that timing would have worked better. The third best practice is to manage your emotions. Like I said, I vented, which is not a constructive way to manage emotions. And that is precisely why I lashed out. There were so many unprocessed emotions. So it's really important to manage your emotions. And I always tell my coaching clients, difficult conversations become difficult because of emotions. Our emotions, but also the emotions we anticipate in the other The next best practice is to show up with curiosity. I had made a lot of assumptions about the situation. I assumed the consultant didn't like me for some reason, or that he didn't respect my opinion. And these were not substantiated. It's not like I heard him talk about me or something, nothing like that. So I really failed to show up curiously in that situation. The last best practice is to reframe our definition of conflict. We all have mental models and definitions for different things in life. My definition of conflict at that time was that it was a bad thing. It needed to be avoided at all costs. It's not going to lead to anywhere good. But I've learned now that if we show up in the right way to this conversation, you bring the right energy, you know what to say and how to say, these conflicts, or even like minor disagreements, can lead to building really like true, genuine, deep trust. So let's look at how to shape this conversation now. We'll talk about the steps of how this conversation should unfold. I'll talk through the steps and then I'll give you an example after we do that, so we bring it all together. So the first step in having this conversation is to describe the situation and behavior as objectively as we can. The next step is to state the impact of that behavior on you, your feelings, the work, the team, or any of that. Right? And then we take that a little bit further and we talk about what unmet goal, need, or value is going unmet because of this behavior or situation. Now, as we go through these three steps, it's possible that the listener is getting a little defensive now, right? Although we are being logical, we're using the right words, it is still possible they feel like they did something wrong. Therefore, it's really important at this point to build or maintain trust. So say something where they feel like they are psychologically safe in this conversation, because otherwise we're going to lose them. After that, we state our request clearly and directly. Right after that, it's really important to follow this sequence. You ask an open-ended question, inviting them to co-create solutions with you. That, the open-ended question is really important because you're moving the listener from putting up a wall, becoming defensive, into problem solving, brainstorming. And the final step, folks at the back can see, is to state the result or the outcome if the request is not met. This step is not always applicable. People choose when to use this, but sometimes it can be really helpful. Okay. So let's wrap up with an example. So if I had a second chance at having this conversation with the consultant, I would say something like this. Hey, consultant, I noticed last week that you had 2 meetings and you went and had it with my director and senior director. I wasn't included. The impact of that was I had to spend part of my one-on-one with my director catching up on what was discussed. And I had some follow-up questions as well that we had to come back to you with. I really like to work efficiently, and I know you do too as well because we are all really busy here. But I felt like we couldn't work efficiently because of the sequence of how these meetings went down. I really enjoy working with you. I would like to collaborate better with you because this project is important to your firm as well as us. And we really want to do something big. So I would really like if you can include me in such meetings going forward. How can we align on that? Is there any support you need from me to get to that? If you don't include me in meetings going forward, I'm afraid it's going to be really hard to collaborate together. And I think that will also impact the team and the overall success of this project. And I'll be silent and see what he has to say. Do you see that if I use this framework and had that conversation, that we would have built more trust? We would have really worked well together. Do you see that? Yeah. Okay. So what are my takeaways for you? First, there's no escaping difficult conversations. They're everywhere. Right? We may be avoiding them, but it's wise to have them. And they are really good opportunities to build trust. Right? And that trust is key to building innovative teams. There's no innovation without trust. Lastly, it's a muscle we can all build, right? I have come a long way from where I was with that consultant, but I'm still learning as well. Especially, like, I think I'm good at the work area now in having difficult conversations, but personal life can still be challenging at times. But it's a muscle. It's like going to the gym. The more you have these conversations, you learn and you become better. So with that, I want to encourage and invite everyone here to make difficult conversations a little bit more easier for ourselves as well as people around us, our teams, our families, our communities. Thank you very much for the nods, for the yeses, for the attention. I appreciate it. Any questions?
Thank you for the presentations. So you mentioned all the steps that we have to take in order to talk with the other party. What are the steps that you are going to take in order to make yourself confident that it is time to speak to that party? I mean, how do you convince yourself you are kind of behind the doors of those meetings? So didn't you ask yourself, should I be included or should I not be included? Did you have any dilemma that you are doing the right thing to speak up or not?
I did, right? So if we go back to the best practices, that was one of the things. The first best practice was believing in what I needed to say, right? I didn't believe. I thought, well, maybe I'm not needed in these conversations. But part of me felt like, no, I should be included. At least I need to know what's being discussed so I can make a decision if I need to be there. So there was doubt there, right? I didn't believe that I was entitled to even have that conversation. Therefore, I didn't have it. That was a mistake. Did I answer your question?
Kind of, but I would like to know what steps did you take for yourself in order to speak up?
To speak up. So I didn't speak up at that time, right? But if I were to, I think managing the emotions were like a big part, right? Because if I didn't do that and I didn't do it, the conversation wouldn't have gone well even if I had it. So I think that was one step I would have taken before. You're saying before the conversation, right? Yeah. And then also along these lines, I think building a case for myself that I am entitled to speak because of these reasons, right? So I would have done that prep work as well, right? What else could I have done? I would have timed it properly, so I would have observed what was going on and I would have taken closer notes, right? And I would have leaned in a little bit more into curiosity, right? Like I said, I made assumptions that he doesn't like me, he doesn't respect my opinion, which were unsubstantiated. I would have opened up that, Nagar spoke about the growth mindset, right? So I would have opened up my options. I would have looked at what other reasons could be there. Maybe he just forgot. Maybe they're just used to it. Maybe there are other reasons that I'm not seeing. I would have questioned a little bit more, and that would have built my confidence in having this conversation. Does that help?
Yeah.
just going to ask about like what kind of like maybe systems or ways you found to deal with emotions and showing up curiosity. I assume that has to do with putting away pride and seeing from like trying to see from the other person's perspective, right? What do you have any like tricks or tips for dealing with the emotional side of it? That's really.
Yeah, I do. I have a whole workshop on EQ. Right?
I figured it'd be one.
Yeah, but I'll give a few tips. So, how long do I have? Hold on. Can I go for like 2 minutes? So there are 4 steps we can use for emotional management. This is like my mini workshop. The first one, like this is how you process the emotion, right? The first step is to become aware of the emotion first, right? We have these high-level emotions where I'm angry, I'm frustrated, but that's very high level. And in coaching, we say you've got to go 2 or 3 layers deep to get to the exact emotion, right? Like you're angry, but are you annoyed? Are you hurt? Are you feeling revengeful? Those are all different things, right? And if you Google, there are emotions wheels, different types created by different people that you can really use to get closer to this emotion, right? So I would have stayed with the emotion there and even gone a little deeper and asked questions around what am I feeling this emotion for? Because there was emotion towards the consultant, but there was also emotion towards me, like because I haven't done anything for months. So it's important to kind of unpack that in different ways. So staying with it is so important, and then deciding what to do about it, right? And taking action. Because I think the way most of us are trained culturally, familiarly, in different contexts is to directly go to the last step and let go of the emotion, right? Which is not it did not serve me, and I don't think it serves a lot of us. So staying with it, getting close to what the emotion is, asking some questions around the emotion, and taking action, and then we can live it. Did that help? We can talk later if you want. Okay, I think we're done here. Thank you so much.